There's a place up ahead and I'm going just as fast as my feet can fly. Come away if you're going. Leave the sinking ship behind.
The 1960s was a turbulent decade. The Vietnam War was escalating. There were the assassinations of President Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr., and it seemed like everybody was protesting something. And yet, World Vision was growing as an organization. World Vision's foundation had been formed in Korea with the orphanages and child sponsorship. So Bob Pierce started the Korean Orphans Choir to support that work and to promote it.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. So I knocked on the orphanage door and said, we don't have any place to go. And there were so many orphans, people wouldn't, they wouldn't question that much where you come from. So it so happens to be run by World Vision. It wasn't, none of us had a room to ourselves, but it was just a room with a bunch of kids. And you have a sleeping blankets. It was tough, but certainly emotionally it was better than where I was. And we got to go to school a little bit and starting to read and write, and somebody in America cared for you.
Sponsorship did not originate with my father. Christian Children's Fund had been doing sponsorship for probably 7, 8, maybe 10 years. So the idea of sponsoring one child was already kind of established in the back of my father's head.
At that time, it was really focused on orphans and children living in homes and orphanages.
The issue was how do we feed these children and how do we care for these children? How can we create an environment in which these children can thrive? World
Vision started hiring directors in those countries where we had child sponsorship.
And so we brought a man who had been with CCF on our staff by the name of Irv Rates. And Mr. Rates became our first director using the policies that he had established with the Christian Children's Fund that we adopted in World Vision.
During that time, we met Bob Pierce. And he said, one of our, Doug Kozart, is leaving Korea, and I need someone to replace him. He said, would you like to go? I said, yes.
And they created the foundation upon which World Vision sponsorship was built and still thrives today.
That was the amazing thing of how these people in America and Canada would help to begin sponsoring children that they'd never seen yet, but send pictures back and forth.
Well, because of the Korean War, too.
Yeah.
There was such a need in Korea.
And there was an orphanage for 3 or 4 years probably before somebody came from World Vision and the choir director who was Korean. Everybody lined up and sang whatever they wanted to sing, and you were chosen, based on your singing, but also probably for who, whatever reason, and I happen to believe it's the Lord, it's God who predestined my life, where I'm going to go.
If there's one thing that people remember about World Vision's history, other than Bob Pierce, it's the Korean Orphans Choir. And you can understand why. The children traveled all over the world, and they performed for heads of state and celebrities.
Lord my God, when I rose on wonder, consider all what thy hands have made. I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, I can throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul.
if you were a sponsor in the US at the time, you saw those children and you realized you were looking at a child a lot like your own sponsored child.
이거는 진짜 이거는 진짜 레코드다. 이게 진짜 첫 번에 우리 만난 애들이야.
그래. 누군가 몰라 이거는.
Let me see.
This one. See, we have same hairdo.
누구야?
이게 누구니?
정태.
굉장히
아니 정태 말고.
same hair. Korean style.
Well, first of all, we didn't have any money. And so Bill Price was working with Bob at that time. And so he told him to go out and get a bus.
First tour, because we had a real Dungreen bus.
Of course, without money, you get the cheapest bus you can.
Free. Everything was free.
And it would run. And it started out with our first concert was just a little bit north of Pasadena.
Every city we enter, bam, and stop. Backfires.
And between World Vision office and the church, we had 2 blowouts.
And then in the middle of a highway, we had to all get out.
Which delayed the choir, the concert, you know. And then how were we going to buy more of these big tires for this big bus without the money?
I really thanks for God. God chose us, so especially me and my brother and my sister. So He chose us.
There were 144,000 orphans, and we were part of 34 kids.
Yeah.
When you think about that, as we get older, I think you appreciate more how God has touched our lives and had handed our destiny, so to speak. And so that makes me think we may have to make it matter and give back.
The Eastern world, it is exploding, violence flaring, bullets loading. You're old enough to kill, but not for voting.
It's not often that a clergyman doubles as a war correspondent, but that's exactly what our next guest has done. He is Dr. Robert Pierce. He's a man who's traveled around the world 35 times. He's been in and out of the troubled area of Vietnam ever since 1952, when it was still known as French Indochina. He's just recently returned from South Vietnam, loaded with information, very strong opinions, and some very good film. Welcome to Today, Dr. Pierce.
Thank you, Hugh.
A pleasure to have you here today to look at some of the film. We're going to show you a little more of the film later on that Dr. Pierce will narrate and explain to us. But let me ask you first, how you as a clergyman became involved there, and particularly as a war correspondent. That's a bit unusual.
Well, actually, I went to China at the end of my preparation for the ministry just to spend the summer. But while I was there, I found very dedicated but obscure people who were really meeting human need and serving with a dedication that made me feel they deserved support. They needed help. And that's how World Vision got started, for that matter.
Would you tell us a little about what World Vision is?
Well, World Vision is an agency. It happens to be that we're a Christian agency, but we serve everyone. We're not out just to serve a particular sect. We want to be in the world what we think Jesus Christ would be if he were here in the middle of all these problems and needs.
Are you mostly a fundraising organization?
No, sir.
No, you're willing to
in fact, my biggest problem is that we aren't raising enough funds for all the things we're trying to do. We're out meeting the people. We have 26,000 orphan children. We have leprosaria. The biggest thing, Hugh, that we have to have is people who will make that human point of contact with people.
Our thanks to Dr. Robert Pierce, war correspondent and clergyman, who's with World Vision is the name of the organization. And thank you for bringing the film and for explaining some of it to us.
Thank you very much.
And good luck in that.
No, you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction.
In the 1960s, we really moved into maturing as an organization and really getting the house in order.
World Vision was growing. When you grow, you have different stages when you need different talents, different strengths, different kinds of leadership.
Bob and Ted Engstrom knew each other from Youth for Christ. And in the 1960s, they saw each other in a hotel lobby someplace. And Bob invited him to World Vision to help out especially with the management and administration side.
My role was to make sure we maintain the course, stay the course.
World Vision was at a place financially and organizationally where they needed to be more careful, more calculating on how they were going to respond to things.
Bob's entrepreneurial style of doing business and ministry was constantly challenged by the board of directors, and those tensions only increased. So as time passed, it became apparent that a difficult decision was going to need to be made.
And my dad was worn out. His physical health had been shot. Emotionally, we were in this very traumatic and vulnerable time as a family.
It's not completely clear whether Bob resigned on his own or he was asked to resign, but it was clear that changes needed to be made at that point.
I remember in December of 1967, I'm sitting in my, not a cubicle, I was in my closet still, I think, and the phone rings, and it's Bob. And he says, "Could you meet me in the parking lot? I need to go for a ride." So he says, "I want to go to the top of Santa Anita, up at the top there, Chantry Flats, and I want to spend some time talking with you." So we go up there, and he says to me, "Do you think I ought to resign? I'm 27 years old. I have been in the organization for less than a year," and he's saying to me, "Do you think I ought to resign?" And I'll never forget it. The only thing I could think of was, well, Bob, I think, why don't we pray? So there, looking over the San Gabriel Valley at Chantry Flats, Bob and I prayed. And when we got through praying, he said, "Tonight, I think I'm going to resign."